what I'd like to do first is, you were given your homework, class 6 and 7, weren't you? Your packet? Let's go over the answers here. Were you out? Okay. Because I only make enough copies for everybody, so if you were out, I have your copy to pass that. You were out too? Okay. She gave it to you last Thursday, I believe, didn't she? Okay. So let's go over this a little, and it'll be a nice way for us to review. Barry, if you want to, you can start it if you want to for the review. What do you want to do? Huh? Okay, okay. Okay, so class 6. Let's look at the question and the answers. This one is not such a long quiz. I would like for us to go around the room and read the question. Everyone, it's we're not going to be able to do that on the quiz 7, but let's do it for quiz 6. It's an agency quiz, and I think it'll be a nice way for us to review. So let's just go around the room and we'll take a question, read it out loud. I think when we hear it, it helps. And just give me the answer. You don't have to read all the answer choices. Justin, let's start with you. What's that about?
It's just a Monday.
Okay.
A seller broker finally decides to buy his client's home for his personal use. Which of the following must he do? I said disclose his intentions in writing to the seller.
Letter D, dog. Everybody get it? Now, guys, now's your time to ask me questions because we're going to move on to sales contracts. Why didn't you get it? Why didn't you get it?
I chose
Have another agent in the office act as a buyer's agent for him? That's a good answer, but the first thing is disclose first. Everybody did, letter C is an okay answer, but the best answer is to disclose that you are interested, you are an agent, and you're going to get another agent to help you. Because what if you just got another agent to help you and you didn't disclose? I mean, it has to be disclosed.
I was going to say, but wouldn't the buyer's agent disclose it for him, like present an offer or put everything in writing for him? Isn't that disclosing?
Well, the best answer is D. You disclose first, and then yes, we know our rules are, we probably do need to get somebody else to help us, but the very first thing is disclosure, disclosure, disclosure. Number 2, Yadira.
A broker must do all of the following except, and I said, is it G? Because I know offers to sell even after an offer has been accepted. Which one is it? A?
The answer is A. Now, guys, read the question carefully. This is an accept question. You answered a true question.
Oh, okay.
So, all of the following except. When you're reading, you really need to read carefully, everybody. We present all offers, and guys, this is testing material too, by the way. We present all offers immediately, no later than 5 days. Does that mean you've got 5 days to do it?
No.
No. It means immediately is where you're supposed to be acting. The offers, if you have multiple offers means you've got more than one buyer making an offer at the same time. You present the offers at the same meeting, the same appointment, in no particular order. So you present the offers to the seller in no particular order, and you go over the pluses and the minuses and the estimated net to the seller, and then the seller chooses the one that they prefer. So A would be the answer on that one. Does that make sense? Does it you, Yadira?
Yes.
Make sense? Okay. Cameron, number 3.
Number 3, which word best illustrates the agent-client relationship, and of course it's fiduciary?
And of course it's fiduciary. Everybody good?
Yeah.
All right, number 4. Okay, I'm having to get back in here into my Sonia.
A firm which has all commissions or 7% on their listing agreement is A, in violation of antitrust laws.
Everybody good on A? Okay, now, listen up to this question. If someone asks you, what's the going commission rate, what would you say? There's no going rate, it's the rate commission is negotiable, right? Can you say, my company charges 7%?
Yes, you can.
Yes, you can. Guys, if somebody called the school and said, what's the going rate for real estate schools? There is not a going rate. We charge X. Guys, you can say that. You're not, now think about it, you can't go out and say, let's negotiate now. Here, let's negotiate now. It's not like that. You can say, here's what I charge. The whole idea is price fixing is where there's no consumer choice, where real estate agents get together and set the price and then the consumer doesn't have a choice on where to go and what to pay. Your firm can say, guys, go out and get us 6%. I would guarantee you, even if they said that, the company's records, you'll have 5, you'll have 7, you'll have 10. There is negotiation, but there's nothing wrong with saying, here's what we charge. And by the way, here's where it goes, because here's what we need it for. The commission split 4 ways. Y'all know that, don't you? It's split 4 ways, and the perception out there is you, the person out there talking to the seller or the buyer, they seem to think that you get all of it. And it's I think it's our job to explain that is the total commission that's split with all the agents involved in this whole transaction. So you can say our company charges this. You cannot have pre-printed forms. Take your listing agreements to an office printer and say, print all this up and put 7% in there. We're having it pre-printed. You can't do that because that does give the impression that there's no chance to negotiate. Everybody with me? There are blanks that we fill in on these forms. So you can go out to meet the owner and you get to filling out the form and you get to the commission and you say, here's what we charge. And they might say, well, will you take less? And you can say no. Or if will you take less? You can say yes. I mean, it's negotiable. Negotiable doesn't mean you got to come down, does it? Negotiable means you could even go up, right? So, anyways, what else does antitrust laws cover? It's more than price fixing. What else is it?
Allocated market.
Allocating markets. What does that mean?
It's, for example, when brokers get together and all like, okay, I'm gonna work in like this area, and then, you can work in that area and get those people there, stuff like that.
Very good. So as brokers are getting together saying, you take this part of the town, we'll take this part of the town. Everyone, if you remember that Antitrust Act is about consumer protection. It's about the consumer choice. And if one broker only has Northwest, the consumer doesn't have a choice to use another broker if they live in Northwest. So you're taking away the choice from the consumer. There's one more in antitrust. What's it?
It's,
Boycotting.
Yeah.
Boycotting. You cannot boycott as a group. Is everybody with me? Don't you have a right to say, I don't want to do business with that company individually? You do, don't you? But when it comes to groups, you can't do it. So your broker in charge can't come to the sales meeting and say, guys, we're not using this lawyer anymore. You can't do that because you're an independent contractor, aren't you? All right, moving on along. What about number 5? Remind me your name. Jessica? Okay.
A buyer client asks her broker about the value of the property she may be interested in. Which of the following can the broker do? I put D, provide information on other closings of similar properties in the last 6 months.
Good job. Why did you pick D and nothing and not the other ones? Why?
I mean,
Well, there's a clue there. That's why I'm asking.
You can't tell them exactly what they should sell their house for. You can just tell them well, this house sold for 80 and this house sold for 90, so based off of that, yeah.
No, you can do a price. You can, usually real estate agents come in with a CMA. You do look at the other properties, you're right. You look at what we call comps. Here's what the houses have sold for, and you compare, and you can do an adjusted number. The commission says you can even say, we think it will sell for X. Most real estate agents probably have a little range there because we're not an appraiser. That's the key. We don't do appraisals. Only appraisers do appraisals. You do a CMA, and when we start talking about that unit, it's going to look like one of the versions of an appraisal, but we are not appraisers, so that's why the A, B, and C would not work. Number 6. Okay.
Which of the following is not a material fact? D, the prior tenant had AIDS.
Everybody good on that? Alrighty, so you understand that the other ones are though? Material facts? Okay. If there's a sex offender in the neighborhood, is that a material fact?
No.
No. Number 7, Renee.
A brokerage firm can accept commissions from both buyer and seller in which of the following? C, acting as a fully disclosed dual agent.
Very good. Acting as a fully disclosed dual agent. Because what does dual agent mean?
Same firm.
Same
representing
firm.
Both of them,
What now?
representing the buyer and the seller.
Same firm. So if I say one agent, does that make sense? One agent, guys, the firm is the agent.
Yes.
The firm is the agent. I'm not saying just Jose. The firm is the agent. The firm is the agent, is the broker. Those words are used interchangeably. So when he said one firm, I'm saying one agent. When you looked at your listing agreement, the seller hires the company, don't they? The company is the seller's agent, not you. So when the seller hires that company and the buyer hires that company, you've got 2 clients in one firm, and right now it's not dual agency. You have to have a transaction, don't you? Or showing, something like that that leads to it. So dual agent is one agent, one transaction, and by the way, that means in-house. Has to be an in-house. And then dual agent means 2 clients. Dual means 2, doesn't it? And the 2 stands for 2 clients. So dual agency, and this is where a lot of students get confused, so make sure you're good, and I know this is in the reading if you want to go back. Dual agency could be Jose found the seller and Jose found the buyer and brought it together. That could be dual agency because Jose works for one company. It could be Jose and Ian. Jose brought the seller, Ian brought the buyer client, and they work for the same company, and that's dual agency. Everybody with me? So it doesn't have to be one, it's not one individual agent only. The one agent means the one firm, everybody, and that's the thing you need to remember. One agent, one transaction, which means in-house transaction. By the way, an out-house transaction would be co-brokered. In a test question, if you see co-brokers, it means 2 firms, and that's a big clue, because that could be a math question too. Co-brokering means 2 firms. All right, so let's move on now. What number are we on? 8. Thank you.
A seller has asked her agent to advertise her house as is and checks no representation of the property disclosure statement. The agent learns that the house has had a major foundation problems occurred. What must the agent do? I chose D.
D.
Inform the buyer of the hidden defect.
Everybody good? The agent cannot say no representation. The agent can't just say, well, it's as is. We have a duty of disclosure, don't we? And material facts have to be disclosed to all parties, whether you represent that party or not. Number 9, Ollie.
Which of the following statement is not true? I choose C.
Very excellent. A provisional broker can be designated by your agent if the BIC is the designated seller's agent. That's not true, is it? Guys, you could write in your notes, and maybe Yasmin told you, it's the only time that two folks within the same office cannot be designated against each other. So basically the only time. In other words, if there are two PBs, that's cool. If there's a PB and a broker, that's cool. If there's a broker and a broker, that's cool. If there's a BIC and a broker, that's cool. The only time they cannot get out of the middle is when there's a provisional broker and a broker in charge on the other side. Why do you think that won't work?
For experience, because one is more experienced than the other.
One is more experienced because a broker in charge is supposed to have experience, aren't they? So the BIC is more experienced, the PB is not. When they're in designated, the PB cannot go ask for help from the BIC. Whose client is going to win? The BIC's client. And is that fair to the firm's clients? It's not, is it? So designated means it is a form of dual, and the clients have given you permission to get out of the middle and go to bat for them exclusively. Whereas dual, everybody's neutral. Can a PB and a BIC be in dual? Yes, because what I just said is neutral. Guys, students miss that question. Let me say it again. Can a PB and a BIC be in dual? Yes, because we're in the middle. It's like you've gotten neutralized. And if you're neutralized, the PB and the BIC, we're just trying to make the transaction happen. And the PB can even ask the BIC for help because we're not advising one person over the other. You've gone neutral, and in your reading and in your listing agreement and by your agency agreement, it says you are to make your own decisions, buyer. You are to make your own decisions, sellers. We cannot advise you anymore. We've gone neutral because the company represents two clients at the same time, and how can we favor one or the other? We can't, unless you ask us to get out of the middle. So make sure you understand that stumps people, and it stumps people because I think we just don't read it carefully. We've got in our mind that a PB and a BIC cannot be designated, and so we just assume they can't be dual. They can be in the middle. That's fine.
As long as the BIC doesn't appoint the VP or the
In the middle, they can stay in the middle, which is neutral.
they cannot be against.
Cannot be against. If they are in the middle, and let's say they're in the middle, Jose and Cameron. If the client said, we both chose designated, if Cameron is a PB and you're the BIC, if there's designation, we know that, excuse me, I mean, bless you. I need to be working, something's not working up here. We know that they cannot designate out. So the BIC will either replace Cameron, you will either replace Cameron, or you will replace yourself. And so if you replace Cameron, it has to be a full broker, non-provisional. Is everybody with me on that? If they can't go into designated, they can't get out of the middle against each other. We know that, right? So if they can't get out of the middle, somebody's going to have to be replaced. And the BIC might say, let me replace you, Cameron, and bring in a full broker because we can compete with a full broker. The BIC might say, let me step out and get a broker in my place, because it would have to be a broker here too, because their client, whoever it was, had a broker. Don't you think they want another broker? Full broker, right? Let me give you, did you all talk about, or did you ask Yasmin, why would a broker in charge be listing and selling? I don't think that's completely common. If you go to work for a large company, Allen Tate, Berkshire Hathaway, some of the large companies, the broker in charge will not be listing and selling. And it's because those companies can afford to pay that broker in charge to stop doing brokerage and oversee the office. Smaller companies don't have the means maybe to pay a salary that someone would want to give up their brokerage business. So sometimes in smaller firms, the broker in charge is still listing and selling. A broker in charge, Jose might say, you know, let me step out, Cameron, so you can stay in and get the experience. That would be good, wouldn't it? Or the broker in charge might say, I can't step out. This is my brother that I'm representing. I can't step out because I still will have conflict of interest. So I've got to stay in and I'll replace you. Now, whoever gets replaced will, someone's going to get a referral fee, aren't they? I mean, if Cameron gets replaced, he ain't going to lose all the commission because he brought it together at the beginning, right? So there'll be some commission splitting, but guys, it's the law of agency, and this is license law too. So you'd have to adhere to that. All right, let's move on. Number, which one? 10? 10, whose turn is it? Ian?
Which of the following is not considered fraud? I put D, telling his buyer clients that the listing they're looking at is one of the most popular listings.
Everybody agree? D-Dog? Okay, how about if I say it this, you say no?
I said yes.
You said yes. How about if you don't tell them? Guys, I could argue it's a violation of agency. Tell me if you hear what I'm saying. What if you don't tell that buyer that it's one of the most popular areas and that house sells the next day and the buyer says, you didn't tell me that it was selling quick in this neighborhood? That would be a problem. Does that make sense? So I would say you probably ought to tell those things. You need to keep your client informed so that they can make a decision. Number 11. Okay.
Okay, which of the following is true? I chose D. An agent must disclose the material fact to a buyer he is working with.
D, an agent must disclose a material fact to a buyer he is working with. If he's working with a buyer, is the buyer a client or a customer? Customer. If he's working for the buyer, it's a client. Write that down. If you're working with a buyer, they are a customer. If you're working for the buyer, the buyer's a client. Guys, you do have to understand that buyers have a choice. They can be a customer or they can be a client. The difference is, how does the agent work? And if the buyer is a client, then the agent owes that old car acronym you learned. All the fiduciary and the confidentiality and all of that. If the buyer is a customer, you owe honest and fair dealings and a level of service, a customer level of service. If the buyer is a customer, well then that means the seller should be the client, right? Because we're a law of agency state, you have to represent somebody or you can't be in the transaction. Does that make sense? And so the buyer needs to know, if you don't want us to represent you, then we're going to represent the seller. And I'm going to say, who do you think is going to win that game? If you don't have anybody representing you, who's going to win? The seller's going to win. So I think you need some representation. I think that as a real estate agent, we ought to convince them to, or try to, that they need to be a client. They need that, I think. But working with means they are a customer and they do get a level of service because you're representing the seller and you're trying to make this work for the seller. They just don't get advice, everybody. Customers don't get help negotiating. They don't get advice. They get everything else though. All right, who wants to take number 12? Who's next? Kristen?
A broker can, in limited circumstances, conceal information about neighbors who live in a community. Is that one false?
Thank you. It is false. And I bet you a whole bunch of you picked true. Now, we're not going to argue over this, but I just want to tell you why it's false. It's false, isn't it? All right, here's the reason it's false. If you look up the word conceal, it means hide. Guys, we're not hiding anything. You don't hide things. Now, there's some things you don't tell, but concealing sounds dark and like you're hiding it. So that's the reason it's false. True, you cannot tell certain things, but it's not because you are hiding it. It's because you just can't tell it. So it might just be a play of the word, but the answer is false. Everybody with me? Okay.
So concealed, associated with unethical.
Conceal would be unethical, I think. Or, yeah, I think that's a good way to say it. Well, good. Most students want to argue with me on that. So we're moving on along so y'all don't have a chance. Number 13, who's next? Go.
A bank can withdraw the amount of his expected commission from his trust account if he will be on vacation when the closing is scheduled. I put false.
Good job. False. Guys, what is a trust account?
Customer's money.
It's somebody else's money, customer or client's money, Jose said. A trust account is an account that a lot of real estate companies still do. A lot of real estate companies don't anymore. They have a lawyer do it, hold the trust account money. It's an account that is protected and safe. You could call it a custodial account, an escrow account. It's money set aside that the bank knows is not the company's money. So if the company goes bankrupt, that money doesn't get frozen because the word trust or escrow on it says this isn't that business's money. It's monies of others, like earnest money deposit, like security deposit if you're in property management, like rent if you're in property management. Okay? All righty, number... Where, huh?
14.
Number what?
14.
14, Larry?
For me,
Mhm.
which of the following will not terminate an agency contract? I've got C, making an offer.
Very good. Making an offer does not terminate agency, but I want you to pay attention to the other ones, everyone. These are test question areas. Now, let me mention the quizzes and the homework that you're given. Your exam might not mirror the questions exactly. And in fact, students say, we didn't have any questions that look exactly like our exam, and you won't. I can't give you any questions that are going to mirror your final exam. The exam is confidential. I can't go in and make up questions that look sort of like that. But guys, any question is helpful if it's a learning and for us to learn the terms and some things about it. So, this is a testing area. This agency quiz is a very good quiz to help you. So I would remember if the property is destroyed. Now, I don't know what the word destroyed means. I don't think it's a tree falling on the gutter and the gutter hanging off. I don't think that's destroyed. But destroyed means the agency, which would be the listing agreement, would be terminated, which means ended. Death of the owner of the firm terminates a listing agreement. Agency would be an example, a listing agreement would be an example. Death of a party to the agreement. The agreement is between the firm, who is called the agent, and the client, who in this case we're talking about listing, would be the seller. If the seller died, the listing agreement would end. If the firm dies, which means closes up, goes bankrupt, or if the BIC dies, the agency agreement would end. Hold that thought 1 minute. If you, as the individual representative working for your company, dies, it does not end because, unfortunately, we can be replaced. Everybody good?
It says the death of the owner of the firm. Is it supposed to be or the firm?
No, the owner of the firm is sort of the firm.
It's sort of.
Yes, the same thing.
Okay.
So even if they said BIC, it would terminate.
Okay.
Because if you don't have a BIC or a broker in charge, then the office has to close down because the broker in charge is over the trust account, the broker in charge is over provisional brokers, and they're even over the entire office, to be honest with you. So why don't you make a note, because we're going to talk about this after our break. When we start talking about sales contracts, destruction of the property does not terminate the sales contract. Death of one of the parties, which would be buyer or seller, does not terminate the sales contract. And so I'll show you in your reading, and I'll show you on the contract form exactly where it says it. So you've got to know for agency agreements, which would be listing and buyer agreement, property management agreement, those things end it. When we talk about a sales contract, those things don't end it. And so that gets a little tricky trying to remember one or the other. All right, moving on along. What number are we on now? 15?
The buyer's
Stacy.
agent must disclose all the following except, I got A.
What's a better answer?
B.
How about, correct, B is correct. The buyer's agent must disclose material fact. Now, I get why that's confusing. Because she may be thinking, well, to whom? She might be thinking, if I represent the buyer, do I have to tell the seller stuff? Yes. Material facts must be disclosed to everybody to all parties, let's say. For example, what if you're a buyer's agent and you find out that the area is getting ready to be rezoned, or they're talking about some rezoning around the area, and that rezoning will increase the value of this property that you're looking at, then it must be disclosed to the seller. And when we are in the real estate business and when we're working with each other, you would tell the seller's agent, wouldn't you? I found out that the zoning is going to change and it's going to affect the value of the property. Guys, that's a material fact. It doesn't feel like it. It doesn't feel like you should tell. It feels like you might hurt the buyer, but you must tell all material facts. Let's reverse it. What if you know that the roof leaks on the seller's house? And what if you are the seller's agent? Guys, you got to tell the buyer. Isn't it sort of the same thing? That's probably going to harm the negotiation for the seller, but you got to tell, but all parties need to know material facts. Because there are facts that are important for a person to make a decision on whether they want to accept an offer or make an offer. So I do get why she chose that. But material facts do have to be disclosed.
So the credit ratings of material fact?
If you know, guys, I don't know that we would even know that much. But if you know that the buyer's got such a credit rating that's poor that probably the transaction, it has little hope, it's a material fact to the transaction. And the seller needs to know so they can decide if they want to take that offer. Now, I'm not saying that you got to tell them what the rating is. I'm not saying you got to tell them how much money the buyer makes. But if it affects the transaction and if it affects the other party's decision on whether to take the offer, it must be told. I personally don't know that you would even know, but if you do and if it would affect the transaction, you do. What number? 16? Whose turn is it? Over there?
Under the exclusive right to sell listing contract, a commission is earned when, and I put A, an offer is presented which exactly matches the seller's terms.
Good. Everybody good?
Yes.
Okay, now stop and think for a minute. An offer is presented which exactly matches the seller's terms. Does the seller have to take that offer? No. They owe commission though. Well, let's say you earned your commission though, right? Guys, that happens in real life. It happens in real life where you get a full price offer, maybe the next day that you put a house on the market. Now this market's different. Hopefully we're explaining to our owners that we might sell the house the next day. But let's pretend like it's not a market like this, and you price the property, list it, and you get an offer the next day for full price. I've had sellers say to me, well, we must have underpriced it for you to get an offer this fast. We don't want to take it, we want more. And if they hired you, the firm, you have a right to say, but we did what you hired us to do. And my company's going to ask for our commission. By the way, you'll learn first offers are best offers. And you can hear all the horror stories where seller says, I'm not taking it. Or even if an offer comes in a little bit less and they say, I'm not taking it, then the odds are that property might stay on the market a little bit longer, and they're going to, lots of times the sellers regret not taking it. Why do you think the first offer is usually the best offer?
Somebody got excited at the place.
They're excited. They don't want anybody else to come in and get it. And so they're, it's like demand. It's all that is supply and demand. And we want to make an offer before somebody else makes an offer. It probably is going to be the best. All right, what's next? 17? Who's next? Terrell?
A broker puts a listing in the MLS and schedules an open house. 2 days later, the seller sells the house to her neighbor across the street. Under an exclusive agency listing, does the seller owe a commission to the broker? No.
No. Why not?
Because it's not an exclusive right to sell.
Excellent. Why are you here this morning? I'm just curious, because I haven't been here in a little while, so you could be confusing me.
No, I'm in the 6 o'clock class.
I know.
That's not something we do later.
Okay. Just checking. It is Halloween month. I just want to be sure I'm on top of things. All righty. The exclusive agency listing agreement, the seller says, you know what, I'll choose one firm, but I do want to try to sell it myself. If I sell it myself, I'm not going to pay you. Now, do you think many real estate brokers have listings like this? Probably not. We like the exclusive right to sell because you're working really hard and you don't get paid unless you put the property under contract and it closes. Number 18, who's next? Portia?
And question number 17, if the broker can prove that she was the procuring cause of the sale, can she claim that she is owed a commission? Put a yes.
Yes. Procuring cause means you started the chain of events that led to the transaction. Number 19.
A listing broker visually inspects the house and finds no obvious or hidden defects. The disclosure statement states no when asked if there have ever been any water leaks in the house. After moving in, the buyers discover records in a closet which indicate a history of water leaks. Who is most likely responsible for non-disclosure of this problem and any subsequent damages and costs? I put B, the seller.
How many put B? Good job. Well, why is the seller responsible?
Because he was asked and he lied.
Because he said no.
And there's records of it.
That's right. What now?
Said there's records of it.
It's like he's hiding it.
Yeah.
He's concealing it. And he said no on that sheet and he lied about it. Guys, let me remind you, the seller does not have to disclose material facts. We are in a caveat emptor state, right? It doesn't mean they can lie about it though. That's called misrepresentation or being fraudulent. So they can't lie about it because then they are responsible. So they could have said no representation, but even then, hiding that where nobody else could find it, I think the seller's going to be responsible no matter what, don't you? So, not the agent, because the agents are held to a standard of, is it reasonable? And is it reasonable that you go looking in the attic and looking in boxes? That's not reasonable, is it? All righty, and number 20, over there, back in the back.
Sally Seller is motivated to sell her house quickly and tells her listing agent of this. The agent is obligated to
D-Dog?
I guess, I don't know.
You don't know? Well, look at it, and if you represent the seller, do you think you're going to tell all buyers agents about that, that they need to sell quickly? Wouldn't that harm your client? Guys, the buyer agent is like the buyer. If you tell the buyer, oh, the seller needs to sell quickly, have you represented your seller? No. Reduce the listing price by $10,000? That's an odd thing. I mean, if they're motivated to sell the property quickly, dropping the price doesn't mean that's going to help. Maybe it will, maybe it won't, but I can tell you that most buyers want to negotiate no matter what the price is, and so even if you price it on the bottom line, offers are going to come in lower, and $10,000 is just so subjective. Advertise it in the MLS and in the paper. No, not unless you have the seller's permission in writing, because they hired you in writing to go look for a buyer at a certain price. They're just saying, we are really motivated. Work hard. All right, comments, questions? That's a pretty good quiz. Can somebody tell me what time it is? My battery went out on my clock.
9:48.
9:48. All right, let's do this. I'm gonna hold off, I'll give you the answers to number 7 after a little bit. I want us to come back and get into our discussion first. So take your break.